On my brother's wedding day, I caught my husband and my future sister-in-law. They were sharing a secret, passionate moment in a dark corner. But instead of making a scene right there, I joined forces with my brother. We turned that day of celebration into a stage for unforgettable revelations. We made them lose everything in a matter of hours. How could a groom betrayed by his own fiancée keep such composure? My story might seem unbelievable to many, but it's the bitter, raw truth I had to live through. It was a sunny day. The five-star hotel was adorned with luxurious white silk ribbons and fresh flowers. Dazzling crystal chandeliers lit up everything, making it sparkle like a fairy tale scene. Soft music and words of blessing filled the air. Today was the big day for my brother James and my future sister-in-law Ellen. As the groom's sister, I, Isabella, couldn't hide my happiness and pride. Standing in a corner of the banquet hall, I smiled, seeing my brother in his flawless tuxedo. His handsome face glowed with happiness. He's 5 years older than me. Ever since we were kids, he has always taken care of me and protected me. After our parents passed away early, he was like a father to me, a friend, my entire world. Seeing that he had found a lifelong refuge with a woman as beautiful and sweet as Ellen, it filled my heart with infinite warmth. Ellen had a fragile and delicate appearance. She spoke softly and always looked at my brother with admiration. During their courtship, she treated me like a real sister. I thought our little family was finally complete, and that I had also found my own happiness. My husband Mark was by my side, his arm around my waist. He was a talented architect, and in my eyes and everyone else's, the perfect man. We had been married for 5 years. We had a marriage that was the envy of everyone. He was always gentle and attentive, my pillar of support in every storm. He gently squeezed my hand and whispered in my ear, "Your brother looks amazing today, and your sister-in-law looks like a dream. They're a match made in heaven." I smiled, resting my head on his shoulder, feeling the familiar calm. Yes, I hope they'll be as happy as we are. I sincerely believed I was the luckiest woman in the world. I had a brother who adored me, a wonderful husband, and soon a charming sister-in-law. I was living in that perfect pink bubble. Until just a few minutes later, I burst it with my own hands. The ceremony was about to begin. Suddenly I realized my husband had disappeared a while ago. I wanted to take a picture with the bride and groom before they went on stage. I looked around but didn't see his familiar figure. I thought maybe he had stepped out to take a call, so I walked alone towards the end of the hallway, where there was a small balcony overlooking the hotel's back garden. It was a quiet place, so I assumed he might be there. As I got closer, I heard whispers mixed with a woman's giggle. That voice was all too familiar. I slowed my pace, and my heart suddenly started to beat a little faster. Through the crack of the open glass door leading to the balcony, I saw a scene that froze my blood. My husband Mark was there, and the woman he was holding in his arms, kissing passionately, was none other than the bride of the day, Ellen, my future sister-in-law. She was still wearing her pristine wedding dress, but now it looked incredibly disgusting and hypocritical to me. Time seemed to stop. My ears went deaf. All the sounds around me disappeared, and I could only hear the sound of my heart shattering into pieces. I leaned heavily against the cold wall to keep from collapsing. There was a lump in my throat, and a wave of nausea rose in my chest. And then their conversation reached my ears. Every word was like a sharp knife, mercilessly stabbing the last piece of hope I had left. "You're very bold, honey, meeting here at a time like this." Ellen's voice was flirty. Her hands were still around Mark's neck. Mark scoffed, a laugh I had never seen from him, full of arrogance and disdain. "What are you afraid of? No one would imagine it. Look at that stupid family, busy as puppets. And her brother, that James, he's just a fool in love. We have everything under control. That stupid, he meant me. A fool in love. He meant my brother." I clenched my fists tightly. My nails dug into my flesh, but I felt no pain. "Still, I'm a little nervous," Ellen continued. "What if everything is discovered later? Besides, I don't like the idea of living with you and your wife." Mark laughed again, this time with contempt. "You don't have to be jealous of that kid." I married her only for the label of being the daughter of a respectable, educated family. To fool the world? She's nothing but a baby machine, my shield. As soon as she gives me a child, I'll find a way to get rid of her. Soon, all of James's fortune will be ours. And then you can have whatever you want, my love. My love. Those two words hit me like a lightning strike. I couldn't take it anymore. My world, my beliefs, 5 years of love. It had all been shattered. In an instant, I turned around and started walking like an automaton. I didn't know where I was going. The tears fell endlessly, but I didn't have the courage to cry out loud. I only felt disgust. A deep disgust. Stumbling along, my mind blank, I bumped into someone. Lifting my head through my tear-blurred vision, I saw a figure. It was my brother, the groom of the day, James. Seeing my pitiful state, he furrowed his handsome brows slightly. "Isabella, what's wrong? Did something happen?" I couldn't hold back anymore. I hugged him and burst into tears. Between choked sobs, I told him everything I had just seen and heard. I expected him to be furious, to run to that balcony and destroy everything, to cancel the wedding immediately. But he just listened to me silently, gently patting my back with his large hand. When I stopped crying, he gently pulled me away and looked me straight in the eyes. His face showed no surprise or anger, just a terrifying calm. He wiped my tears gently and then winked at me, a meaningful gesture that only we as siblings understood. He whispered in my ear, a sentence I will never forget in my life. "Calm down. The main act is about to begin." What would happen with this story? What was the main act my brother was talking about? If you esteemed listeners are as curious as I am, do not hesitate to subscribe to the Elderly Stories channel and activate notifications so you don't miss the next chapter of this dramatic tale. My brother James's words hit my ears like a thunderbolt, leaving me so stunned that I even forgot to cry. The main act in such a critical situation, when my dear brother was being betrayed on his wedding day by his fiancée and my husband, how could he say something like that so calmly? My mind was a mess. I thought maybe the shock had been so great that he had gone crazy. Seeing me still standing there stunned, James said nothing more. He simply took my hand firmly and led me towards the end of the hall, to the groom's waiting room. He looked around cautiously, and only after making sure no one was there, he pushed me inside and locked the door. The room was decorated with white ribbons and balloons, but the air inside was heavy and tense, almost suffocating. "Isabella, listen to me carefully." James turned and looked me straight in the eyes. His expression was no longer one of terrifying calm. It was the seriousness and cold determination I only saw when he made important business decisions. "I've known about all this for a long time." I froze once again. "For a long time? How is that possible?" James sighed and pulled out a chair for me to sit on. "It was 3 months ago," he began to recount. "I started to think something wasn't right. That woman Ellen showed an excessive interest in our company's management. She frequently asked about projects or the financial situation. Details that a fiancé normally wouldn't bother to know in such detail. And your husband Mark acted with an abnormal familiarity with her. Subtle exchanges of glances, small gestures, things that only those involved would notice. I felt a knot in my chest. While I was blind with happiness, my brother had silently detected the dangerous undercurrents. "I had a bad feeling," he continued, "so I secretly hired a private detective. And what they discovered was much more terrible than I had imagined. This wasn't just about infidelity, Isabella. Behind it all, there was a meticulously calculated conspiracy." James opened his phone and showed me several photos and documents. They were photos of Mark and Ellen on secret dates in luxurious places. There were also bank statements showing large sums of money transferred from an unidentified account to Ellen's. And what horrified me the most was a detailed plan found in Mark's emails. The plan was organized in phases. First, Ellen would seduce my brother with her beauty and false sweetness, to marry him and officially become part of our family. At the same time, Mark, as my husband, would use my trust to gradually leak internal company information. Their ultimate goal was that after the wedding, Ellen would convince James to entrust Mark with the management of several important projects. That way they could conspire to divert company funds, create phantom debts, and finally bankrupt the company our parents left us, to take everything for themselves. I felt the blood freeze in my veins. My 5 years of marriage, the love I had cultivated, had all been just a move in their plan. Mark didn't love me. He had only used me as a pawn and a tool to carry out their dirty conspiracy. The romantic betrayal now turned into a deep hatred. They hadn't just trampled on my feelings. They had also tried to destroy our parents' life's work. Then why did you go ahead with this wedding knowing everything? I asked, looking up at my brother. My voice trembled. James looked at me, and a sharp glint crossed his eyes. If I had broken off the engagement, then we would have only caught 2 small fish, Mark and Ellen. The one pulling the strings from the shadows would have never been revealed. Besides, we didn't have enough proof to expose their entire conspiracy. My brother decided to turn the wedding itself into a trap, a grand stage where everyone could witness the play together. James squeezed my hand. I have everything prepared, Isabella. The company's important assets have been transferred to a secure trust. The projects they are interested in are just worthless ghost projects. And I've installed recorders and cameras everywhere. We just have to wait for them to expose themselves. I looked at my brother, feeling pity and admiration at the same time. He had endured all this alone, planning and counterattacking, while I was still happy in my false pink-colored world. Now I need you. James's voice became more serious than ever. Your appearance, the fact that you've discovered the truth at this moment, is a variable they didn't expect. But that will become our ace in the hole. Mark and Ellen will only see you as a poor wife hurt by betrayal. They will never suspect you. Right now, keep playing that role. Keep crying. Pretend to be devastated. The more miserable you look, the better. Can you do it? I quickly wiped away my tears. The pain still burned in my chest, but it had now transformed into the flames of hatred. My brother was right. This was no time to be weak. I wasn't just crying over my husband's betrayal. I had to fight for justice for our entire family. I can do it. I nodded, my voice much firmer. Just then, there was a knock at the door. Mr. James, it's time for the ceremony to begin. It was the event organizer's voice. James stood up and adjusted his bow tie. He looked at me and smiled, a smile full of confidence. All right, little sister. Let's go out. The show is about to begin. Remember, you're not alone. Your brother is here. My brother opened the door and we walked out together. When we reached the lobby, we saw Mark and Ellen. They were talking happily with some guests arm in arm. Upon seeing James and me, Mark quickly approached with his usual concerned expression. Isabella, where were you? I've been looking everywhere for you. I looked up at him. My eyes were still swollen from crying. I didn't say anything. I just shook my head and moved closer to my brother. Mark seemed a little puzzled by my coldness, but he probably thought it was because of exhaustion. The music in the wedding hall suddenly turned more solemn. The master of ceremonies announced in a powerful voice, "And now, let's give a warm welcome to today's stars. The groom, Mr. James Smith, and the bride, Miss Ellen Jones." All the lights focused on them, and all eyes filled with admiration. And as my brother, the groom, took that woman's hand, the woman who almost became my sister-in-law, to enter the hall, I smiled. My smile was probably the most perfect lie of my life, but it was also the smile that foretold the storm that was about to come. Under the dazzling stage lights, my brother and Ellen looked like a perfect couple. James still wore a happy smile. But I knew it was just part of a flawless performance. She pretended to be shy and sweet, stealing loving glances at him from time to time. She was an exceptional actress. They walked together down an aisle covered in white roses, amidst the incessant applause of hundreds of guests. I sat in the front row of the family section with Mark by my side. He still had his arm around my shoulders, whispering sweet words to me from time to time. Aren't they beautiful? I hope we also celebrate such a grand wedding anniversary. I just leaned on his shoulder in silence, pretending to be intoxicated by the romantic atmosphere of the ceremony, but in reality I was fighting to suppress the nausea rising in my throat. Every word and action from him now felt disgusting to me. His hand on my shoulder, the same hand that once caressed me tenderly, was the same one that had held another woman just minutes before. The ceremony proceeded according to the usual protocol. The master of ceremonies, with his honeyed voice, praised the predestined love story, the meeting of two souls. Hearing it, I almost burst out laughing. Destiny. Yes, a destiny woven with conspiracies and calculations. After the empty speeches, the ring exchange finally arrived. An adorable flower girl dressed in immaculate white came on stage with the wedding rings in a red velvet box. James and Ellen looked at each other, ready to exchange their symbols of love. One moment. Suddenly, a voice from the audience broke the sacred moment. The whole hall held its breath, and all eyes turned to the person who had just spoken. It was a middle-aged woman. Her attire was quite elegant, but her face was full of anger and pain. She was accompanied by an older man, probably her husband. I saw Ellen on stage shudder slightly, and her face turned pale for an instant. My brother remained calm, as if he had anticipated this woman's appearance. "Excuse me, who are you? What's going on?" The master of ceremonies tried to control the situation. The woman didn't answer. Instead, she walked straight onto the stage and stood in front of Ellen. "Ellen, do you recognize me?" she said, her voice mixed with anger and disappointment. Ellen took a step back, her face so pale there wasn't a drop of blood in it. Ma'am, why are you here?" "Why shouldn't I be here?" the woman scoffed bitterly. "I've come to see how my future daughter-in-law, the one who swore eternal love to my son, is about to become another man's wife. I've come to seek justice for my son." A murmur began to spread among the guests. Future daughter-in-law. Son. What was happening? Mark, sitting next to me, was also surprised. "What's wrong, Isabella? Who is that woman?" he asked me. I just shook my head, pretending to be equally surprised and confused. The woman turned to the guests and raised her voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to interrupt this happy day, but there's something I must say. This young lady on stage, Ellen, was my son's fiancée. They loved each other for 5 years, celebrated their engagement, and were just waiting for the wedding date. But in just a few months, she changed her mind and left with a richer man, leaving my son plunged into terrible pain." As she finished, she pulled a wad of photos from her bag and threw them on the stage. Photos of Ellen with another man, acting affectionately, scattered. There were also photos from her engagement party. A collective gasp echoed throughout the hall. Now all the looks directed at the bride were not of admiration, but of curiosity, doubt, and reproach. Ellen was frozen on stage, her face white as paper. She tried to explain, stammering, "No, it's not that. That person and I, we broke up a long time ago." "Broke up?" the woman scoffed again. "How shameless! Now you're lying. Just 3 months ago, you took money from my son for shopping and investments. You deceived him and used him. How can you betray him like this now?" Ellen couldn't say anything and looked at James with pleading eyes. But my brother, the groom and the one who should be the angriest, simply crossed his arms and looked at her, with an unfamiliar coldness and distance. I, sitting below, watched the play in silence. I knew this was the first act my brother had prepared. He had found the ex-boyfriend Ellen abandoned and invited his mother here. He wanted to rip off Ellen's mask of innocence and purity in front of everyone. Seeing the situation spiraling out of control, Ellen suddenly put her hand to her chest, staggered, and collapsed on stage, faking a faint. "Oh my God, the bride fainted," some shouted. Ellen's family, who I knew were just hired actors, rushed onto the stage, creating a chaotic scene. In the midst of it all, James slowly walked over and looked down at the fainted Ellen. He showed no concern. Instead, he gave a slight smile. He took the microphone from the stunned master of ceremonies. "Ladies and gentlemen, His voice resounded firm and clear, silencing the entire noisy hall. "I'm sorry to have shown you such an unpleasant play, but I believe the truth must always come to light." He looked at Ellen, who was peeking at the crowd's reaction. "You act very well, Miss Ellen, but I think it's time to end this farce." His words were like a bucket of cold water for everyone. Ellen startled quickly, closed her eyes, but it was too late. Everyone had seen her. "And to make this play even more interesting," James continued, "I would like to invite another special guest to the stage, someone who is closely related to this charade." He looked towards where Mark and I were sitting. My heart started to beat faster. I knew it was our turn to go on stage. The stage lights suddenly turned directly towards Mark and me, making us the center of all attention. Hundreds of pairs of curious and surprised eyes were fixed on the family section. Mark was stunned, not understanding what was happening. He turned to me and whispered in a confused voice, "Who is your brother calling a special guest?" I didn't answer. I just looked at him with eyes full of tears. With an innocent and helpless expression, I knew it was my turn to act. On stage, James continued raising his voice. This time he addressed my husband directly. "The person I want to invite is none other than my brother-in-law, the architect Mark Johnson. Could you come up here and share this joy with us?" This sudden invitation caused even more commotion in the hall. People didn't understand why the groom was calling his brother-in-law to the stage at such a delicate moment. Mark was completely paralyzed. He looked at me, then at the stage, and his face turned pale. He probably started to feel that something was very wrong, but faced with his brother-in-law's public invitation and the gaze of hundreds of people, he couldn't refuse. "Go up, honey," I said softly, giving him a gentle push on the back. With an innocent tone, I added, "Maybe James's brother wants you to share the secret of a happy marriage." My words were like a needle prick, but enough to make Mark shudder. He swallowed hard, and forcing a smile, slowly got up and walked towards the stage. Each of his steps seemed to weigh a ton. When Mark got on stage, James put an arm around his shoulders affectionately and addressed the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, don't you think my brother-in-law is handsome and talented? I am very proud to have a brother-in-law like him. Not only is he a talented architect, but also a wonderful husband who deeply loves my sister." James's compliments baffled Mark even more. He could only smile awkwardly without saying anything. "And perhaps," James continued, his voice suddenly turning significant, "he is so perfect that not only my sister loves him, but other women love him too. Isn't that right, my dear bride?" James turned to Ellen, who was still lying on the floor pretending to be unconscious. But upon hearing this, I saw her eyelids tremble slightly. Mark's face was already as white as paper. He started to sweat coldly and tried to break free from James's arm. Brother-in-law, what are you saying? Everyone is misunderstanding things." "Misunderstanding?" James laughed out loud, a laugh without any warmth. "Well, let me show everyone what the misunderstanding is." As he finished, James signaled to the technical team. The two huge LED screens on either side of the stage, which originally showed romantic photos of the couple, suddenly went dark and turned back on. But this time, the image that appeared was not of roses or candles. It was a video recorded from a hidden angle on the balcony. The whole room held its breath, and the scene that I myself had to witness just an hour before unfolded vividly before the eyes of hundreds of people. My husband Mark hugging and passionately kissing the bride Ellen, dressed in her immaculate wedding dress. The audio was also recorded very clearly. Every one of their disgusting words echoed throughout the hall. That stupid woman is busy as a puppet. And that James is just a fool in love. I married her just to fool the world. She's nothing but a baby machine. The entire hall seemed to explode. Shouts, insults, and looks of contempt rained down mercilessly on the two people on stage. Ellen could no longer pretend to be faint. She jumped up pale and trembling from head to toe. Mark could barely stand. He staggered back a few steps and, pointing at the screen, stammered, "No, it's not true. It's edited. It's a setup." But his weak words couldn't silence the crowd's anger. Garbage. What a pair of adulterers. I can't believe it. Insults erupted from everywhere. Ellen's fake family couldn't keep acting either. They stood paralyzed, their faces flushed with shame, not knowing what to do. And I was still sitting in the front row. Tears started to flow again. This time it wasn't an act. They were tears of pain. From having to relive that scene and hear those poisonous words again in front of so many people. I covered my face with my hands. My shoulders trembled. I had to show the image of the miserable victim, the wife completely shattered by the cruel truth. On stage, James looked at me. A flash of compassion crossed his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by cold determination. He walked over and snatched the microphone from the master of ceremonies. "Ladies and gentlemen," he shouted. His voice had an invisible force that instantly silenced the chaotic hall. "Have you all seen it? This is the true face of the woman I was going to marry, and the man I once considered my brother-in-law, part of my family." He turned to Mark and Ellen. His gaze was like two knives. "You two, do you have anything else to say? Or do you want me to show you something even more interesting?" Mark and Ellen, desperate, could only shake their heads. They were completely cornered with no way to excuse themselves. "But all this," James continued, his voice turning even more mysterious and terrifying, "doesn't end here. This drama of infidelity is actually just the tip of a much larger iceberg." The entire hall fell silent again. Everyone wondered what the groom meant. James pulled a bundle of documents from his tuxedo pocket and held it up for everyone to see. What they really wanted wasn't love, but this. What was that bundle of documents? And what relationship did it have with the person who, according to my brother, was pulling the strings from the shadows? All eyes were fixed on the bundle of papers in my brother's hand, waiting for an even more terrible truth to be revealed. The bundle of documents in James's hand was like a mysterious object that captured everyone's attention in the hall. Everyone held their breath, waiting to see which way this play would unfold. Mark and Ellen also looked up, and in their desperate eyes, terror was now reflected. They probably knew better than anyone what those papers contained. "Before I tell you what this is," James said slowly and clearly, "I'd like to tell you a little story. The story of an old cunning fox who used 2 skunks to rob a chicken coop." He scanned the room, casting a piercing gaze at some of the guests sitting in the VIP section. I noticed a middle-aged man with a burly face and wearing an elegant gray suit suddenly tense up a bit, cough slightly, and adjust his tie. "The fox," James continued, "knew the chicken coop was very well protected, so he didn't dare act on his own. That's why he found 2 skunks, a male and a female. He promised them a life of abundance, food, and warm clothes. They just had to help him carry out a plan. The female skunk's mission was to seduce the head rooster, the future owner of the chicken coop. The male skunk's mission was to woo the head rooster's sister, a naive hen, to become part of the family." Hearing this, I no longer needed to act. The tears truly welled up. My brother's metaphorical story was like another knife twisting in my pain. I was that naive hen. Their ultimate goal, James's voice turned even colder, was after gaining their trust to slowly open the gates and break the fences, so the old fox from outside could quietly come in and take over the entire chicken coop. Isn't that a perfect plan? He looked directly at Mark and Ellen. "You 2 skunks. Does this story sound familiar?" Mark and Ellen couldn't say anything. They just hung their heads. "And this what I have in my hands." James raised the bundle of documents. "Is the detailed plan and the map that the old fox drew for the 2 skunks. The map that tells them which path to take and where to break the fence. This is the complete plan to take over the Smith Group. Our parents' life's work." He went through the documents one by one, projecting their content directly onto the big screen. Figures, charts, and dirty business strategies appeared clearly. Their plan wasn't limited to diverting company funds. It included creating false scandals, undermining James's credibility, and fostering internal divisions, to finally create the conditions for a competing company, to acquire the Smith Group at a bargain price. and the name of that competing company was also written clearly: Golden Empire. The whole room started murmuring again. Golden Empire was not an unknown name in the business world. It was an emerging force that had risen rapidly with bold and controversial moves. And the man in the gray suit who had shown strange behavior before was none other than the president of Golden Empire, Mr. Morris. Now all eyes turned to him. Mr. Morris turned pale, but tried to maintain his composure. He stood up, adjusted his clothes, and tried to leave the room. "Mr. Morris, where are you going in such a hurry?" James's voice was like an invisible rope tying his ankles. "The best part is yet to come. You don't want to miss it, do you?" Mr. Morris turned and forced an awkward business smile. "President Smith, I think there's a misunderstanding. I have nothing to do with your company's internal affairs." "Nothing to do with it," James laughed coldly. "Then how do you explain your secret meetings with these two people, and the money you sent to Miss Ellen so she could pose as a rich girl, and the promise of a project director position for Mr. Mark if everything went well?" Each of James's questions was a solid blow. That made Mr. Morris barely able to stand. I knew my brother wasn't just talking. He had all the proof in his hands. Just then, two men in plain clothes, who looked like police officers, slowly approached Mr. Morris's table. They said nothing, just looked at him fixedly with a solemn gaze. Mr. Morris realized that all his escape routes were blocked. He collapsed into his chair, his forehead drenched in sweat. The play he had so carefully constructed was about to end. The old fox had finally been cornered. I, sitting below, watched it all. My heart was no longer filled with personal pain, but with anger at the vileness and cruelty of the business world. For profit, they were capable of trampling on everything: love, family ties, even human decency. My husband Mark, whom I once loved madly, was just a pawn on someone else's chessboard. He had sold his soul for a vain promise. He looked at me, and in his eyes there was no longer defiance, but an extreme emptiness and desperation. He had lost everything: love, honor, and also his future. On stage, James, after exposing the entire conspiracy, turned to me. He walked in my direction without saying anything and silently held out his hand. I took his hand, and we went up on stage together. He took the microphone, and his voice was no longer sharp, but softened with a touch of compassion. "Ladies and gentlemen, the person most hurt in this story is not me, but my sister, Isabella. This girl has had to endure the deceit and betrayal of the man she deeply loved. She is completely innocent." He turned to me and with a look full of love said, "Isabella, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you had to go through this. I should have realized sooner. I should have protected you better." I just shook my head, and the tears started to flow again. But this time they were tears of emotion and gratitude. "Today's wedding," James continued, "will have no bride, but the party will continue. I hope all our distinguished guests will stay and consider this a party to celebrate the truth." The entire hall burst into applause. They weren't applauding for a wedding, but for the courage and victory of justice, just when I thought it was all over. A sharp scream came from the bride, who was collapsed on the floor. Ellen leaped up. She tore a sharp hairpin from her hairstyle, and with a crazed look lunged at me. "It's all your fault. This is all your fault." Ellen's frenzied action was so fast and sudden, it left everyone stunned. The hairpin shining under the stage lights flew towards me like a poisoned arrow. I was paralyzed, my mind blank. I realized the imminent danger, but couldn't react. James beside me didn't have time to intervene either. When the tip of the hairpin was just inches from my face, a shadow shot out from behind like lightning. It was none other than Mark. He threw his whole body in front of me. The sharp point of the hairpin grazed his shoulder, leaving a red blood stain on his white shirt. "Ah!" Mark shouted in pain, staggering back. Ellen seemed surprised by her own action and by Mark's reaction. She dropped the hairpin and stood there, stunned, her face pale. It was then that the hotel security guards rushed to subdue her and took her away. The hall plunged back into chaos. James ran to help Mark. "Are you okay?" Mark. His face contorted in pain, shook his head. He didn't look at James, but at me. His gaze was very complex. There was regret, pain, and somehow a kind of relief. Isabella, are you okay? I looked at the bloodstain on his shoulder. My heart filled with mixed emotions. Why had he done it? How could the man who had deceived and used me ruthlessly risk his life to protect me? Or was this another act? An attempt to get my last bit of compassion, take him to the infirmary immediately. James ordered the hotel staff. As Mark was taken away, the two plainclothes officers also took Mr. Morris. The president of Golden Empire no longer looked imposing. He was just a failed old man, walking with his head down amid the accusations and contempt of the people. The wedding charade had finally come to an end. James took the microphone again and tried to calm the guests. Ladies and gentlemen, once again I apologize for the unexpected incident. Our party will have to end here. On behalf of the family, I sincerely thank you all for your attendance. The guests began to leave one by one, taking with them an unforgettable story. What had been a splendid wedding hall now looked desolate and cold, like a ruin. James and I stood silently in the empty space. Extreme exhaustion washed over us. It's all over, Isabella. James gave me a gentle pat on the shoulder. I nodded, but a big question remained in my mind. Brother, how did you know everything? The company's acquisition plan, Mr. Morris's role. How did you know? James looked at me and gave a sad smile, because I wasn't the only one who wanted to unmask him. My brother told me another story, a story that had been hidden for years. Before our father passed away, he was a close friend and business partner of Mr. Morris. Together they laid the first bricks of both companies, but it was that same Mr. Morris who, with dirty tricks, cheated our father to take all his shares and drive him to bankruptcy. That blow made our father fall ill, and shortly after his health deteriorated and he passed away. I always had my doubts about our father's death. James's voice grew heavier. After inheriting the company, I began to investigate secretly. And gradually I found evidence of his crimes. But he was too cunning and covered all his tracks skillfully. I never had enough evidence to bring him down. Until Ellen appeared, my brother continued. At first I was also fooled by her innocent appearance. But I realized there were too many coincidences. She always casually mentioned projects where Golden Empire was competing with us. So I had her investigated, and I discovered the relationship between her and Mr. Morris. I realized he was trying to repeat the same script with me as he did with my father, and I decided this was my chance to avenge our father. Hearing this, I felt a lump in my throat. Behind the company's success, my brother had carried such a heavy burden of revenge. He had had to live a lie, acting with the woman he was supposed to marry, waiting for the day he could bring down his enemy. So, everything was in your plan. Most of it, yes. James nodded. Except for one thing. I didn't know your husband was also part of his plan, much less that you would be the fuse for all of this. Your appearance, your courage was the unexpected variable, the decisive blow that made him fall without time to react. My brother looked at me with pride. My little sister, you've really grown up. I managed to smile through my tears. We had won. Together as siblings, we had won. Shortly after, a hotel employee came to inform us that Mark had received first aid. The wound wasn't deep, but he needed to go to the hospital for a tetanus shot and a more thorough checkup. He said he wanted to talk to me alone for a moment before leaving. I hesitated a bit, but finally nodded. In the end, I wanted to know if there was any sincerity left in him. I went into the infirmary. Mark was sitting on a cot, his shoulder bandaged. He looked disheveled. His designer suit was wrinkled and abandoned, his shirt stained with blood, and his face lacked all vitality. Seeing me, he looked up, his eyes full of guilt. I'm sorry, Isabella. What good is an apology now? I asked coldly. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said, lowering his head. I just wanted to tell you one thing. The moment I jumped to protect you, it was sincere. It wasn't an act. I looked at him in silence. For the last 5 years, he continued in a hoarse voice, I've lived in a lie. I approached you because of Mr. Morris's plan for the money. But then I started to truly feel something for you. Your sweetness, your kindness, they moved my heart. But I was already in too deep. I couldn't turn back. I wanted you, and I also wanted the money and status. Greed clouded my reason. He looked up at me, and tears began to well up. Today, facing danger, I realized the only thing I wanted to protect was you. But it's too late for everything now. I listened to his late confession without feeling any emotion in my heart. Love. Maybe there was, but the betrayal and the damage he caused me had killed that love. Save those words for the judge, I said in an expressionless voice. Between us, everything is over. I turned and walked out, leaving him alone, with his regret and his late tears. The moment the infirmary door closed, the door to my 5 years of marriage also officially closed forever. A week after the stormy wedding, everything began to calm down gradually. But the aftermath was still enormous. The Golden Empire case became a scandal that shook the business world. Mr. Morris Ellen and several other top executives were arrested and investigated for fraud, embezzlement, and industrial espionage. Despite his act of saving me, Mark could not escape his involvement. As a key piece of the plan, he was summoned to testify and faced inevitable justice. I filed for divorce, and the whole process was carried out quickly and without dispute. We decided to sell our house, the only common asset of value. I didn't want to keep anything that reminded me of a past full of lies. After everything was settled, I felt I needed some time for myself. I decided to take a trip alone, to go somewhere far away, to clear my mind and start a new life. I chose Majorca, the island of calm, a place quiet enough to heal my wounds. During my days in Majorca, I didn't visit many places. I just spent my time walking on a strank beach, sitting in small, pretty cafes, reading and writing. After so many storms, I realized that what I really needed was peace of mind. And one cool afternoon, as I was sitting in a wooden cafe overlooking the sea, sketching out ideas for a new company project, a familiar voice sounded beside me. "Hello, small world." I looked up and was surprised. It was the police officer who had handled my car accident that day. His sudden appearance puzzled me a bit. He was no longer wearing his strict uniform, but a comfortable khaki jacket and jeans. He looked much younger and more approachable. The afternoon wind of Majorca slightly ruffled his dark, thick hair. "Hello?" I smiled, trying to hide my surprise. "What a coincidence finding you here. Are you on vacation?" "You could almost say that," he replied. A soft smile revealed a slight dimple. "I was transferred here a few weeks ago." "You could say I'm starting a new life?" He looked at my notebook and pen. "Were you working?" "Sorry to interrupt." No, I just finished." I hurried to close the notebook. Then he hesitated a bit. "Would you mind if I sit here for a moment? The cafe is very crowded, and this is the only free spot." I looked around, and indeed the small, pretty cafe was full of people. "Yes, of course, sit down." He pulled up a chair and sat across from me, ordering a hot latte. There was a slightly awkward silence between us. I didn't know what to say, and he also seemed to be looking for a suitable topic. "At the wedding that day?" He finally broke the silence. "I saw everything. You were very brave." His words surprised me a bit. I thought he had only come to handle the case, and I was surprised he had noticed other things. "Thank you. Fortunately, it's all in the past." "I'm David," he introduced himself suddenly. "Isabella," I replied. "Nice to meet you, David." We started talking. At first, it was just light conversation about Majorca work and personal hobbies. But gradually, the conversation deepened. David told me why he had been transferred. After years working in the stressful environment of Chicago, he felt exhausted and wanted to live and work in a quieter place. He loved the mountains, the forests, and the fresh air of the island. I also shared my story. Not the painful details of the betrayal, but my decision to leave the city and my desire to find a new balance in life. We realized we had something in common. We were both on a journey to find a new beginning. David was a very engaging person to talk to. He was intelligent and funny, but in his eyes there was something calm and deep, typical of someone who has lived through a lot. Talking with him made me feel very comfortable, a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. The sky began to darken and the warm yellow lights of the cafe turned on, creating a very romantic atmosphere. I don't know how long we talked. "It's late," David said, looking at his watch. "I have to get back to the station." "It's been a pleasure talking to you, Isabella." "Likewise." I smiled. "Ah, this weekend." He hesitated again. "I'm planning a hike in the Serra de Tramuntana, and I was wondering if you're not busy, would you like to come?" His invitation made my heart skip a beat. "Hiking? I've never done it." "All the more reason you should try it." He smiled. "The air there is incredible. It helps release all the stress." I thought for a moment and then nodded. "Yes, I'd love to." After that chance encounter, David and I had our first date. We climbed the mountains together, walked through extensive pine forests, and discovered small restaurants hidden in the alleys of Palma. With David by my side, I was no longer the woman who had to act strong, the one who had to distrust everyone. He gave me a strange sense of security and peace. He didn't ask about my past or make me relive painful memories. He just stayed by my side in silence, sharing with me the small joys of life. The feelings between us grew naturally and softly, like the morning mist of Mallorca. One night, as we were sitting by the Torrent de Paris, contemplating the calm lake reflecting the moonlight, David suddenly took my hand. "Isabella." His voice sounded deep and warm. "I know you've been through a lot. I don't want to reopen old wounds. I just want to tell you that if you'll let me, I'd like to be the person who writes a new chapter of your life with you. A chapter full of joy and happiness." I looked into his sincere eyes and my heart was moved. Tears welled up again, but this time they were tears of happiness. I didn't say anything, just nodded and squeezed his warm hand tightly. 2 years later. "Mommy, hurry up. Daddy and Uncle James are waiting outside." My little daughter Claire's cheerful voice rang out from the door. I smiled and adjusted the bow she wore in her hair. "Mommy's coming, my princess." I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw the image of a woman radiant with happiness. Today was a special day. It was my first wedding anniversary with David, and also the day the whole family was going to Chicago to attend the opening of a new branch of the Smith Group. My life had completely changed. After that fateful trip to Mallorca, I found the true love and happiness of my life. David, after we dated for a while, decided to request a transfer back to Chicago to be by my side. He said that wherever I was, there was his peace. We had a small, warm wedding on the beach with only our loved ones. My brother James also found his own happiness after all the storms. He fell in love with a kind teacher, and they recently had their first child, a healthy boy. The Smith Group, under James's direction and with my support, grew spectacularly, becoming one of the leading companies in its sector. As the car drove along the familiar highway, Claire sat on my lap, chattering and pointing at everything she saw out the window. David in the driver's seat turned from time to look at me and the girl with a gaze full of love. When the car passed by a large prison, I suddenly fell silent. I knew that inside their people were paying for their mistakes. I had heard that Mark was going to receive a reduced sentence soon for good behavior. I also heard that Ellen had suffered a real mental breakdown and had been transferred to a psychiatric hospital for treatment, and Mr. Morris, old and sick, finally collapsed behind bars. I didn't hate them anymore. My heart was now full of peace. All the hatred had been left behind, and love and forgiveness had taken its place. The opening party was a great success. In the midst of the bustling atmosphere, I received a beautiful bouquet of white roses with no sender. Inside was a small card with shaky handwriting, typical of an elderly person. "Congratulations. May you be very happy." I knew who it was from. Probably someone somewhere was watching me and sincerely wishing me the best. That night after the party, when Claire was already fast asleep, David and I stood on the hotel balcony, contemplating the bright night lights of Chicago. He hugged me from behind and rested his chin on my shoulder. "Thank you," he whispered, "for coming into my life, for making my days meaningful." I smiled, turned around, and rested my head on his firm chest. I should be more grateful. Thank you for healing all the wounds within me." We hugged in silence, fully feeling the happiness of the present. Life is truly like a long journey with countless unpredictable forks. There were times when I thought I had fallen into the abyss of despair, but it was in the darkest place that I found the light of my life. A new beginning, a new happiness. Everything was right here in my arms. After the trip to Chicago, we returned to our quiet routine. Our small house was once again filled with Claire's laughter and the warmth of family. My brother James also came over often on weekends with his wife and son. Seeing my daughter and my nephew playing together, I felt my heart heal completely. The past seemed very distant. Just an old story I remembered from time to time, the anonymous white roses and the card from the opening day. I simply regarded them as a late apology from one of Mark's relatives. I didn't want to think about it or give it any more importance. I put the card in the corner of a drawer and locked it, as if closing an old chapter of my life. But life is not always as calm as a lake. The first ripples began to form so subtly that at first I thought it was just my hypersensitivity from everything I'd been through. Sometimes, while driving down the street, I had the feeling that a familiar black car was following me. But when I looked closer in the rearview mirror, the car would disappear into traffic. Once, while playing with Claire in a park near our house, I felt a fixed gaze on me and my daughter from a distant bench. It was a middle-aged woman dressed very elegantly, with a wide-brimmed hat and sunglasses covering part of her face. When I looked at her again, she immediately turned her head and left the park in a hurry. When I told David about this, he just laughed and hugged me. "You're overthinking again. You are a successful and beautiful executive now. It's normal for an admirer to look at you." But I knew my husband was just trying to reassure me. His police instinct made him silently alert as well. "I'll check the security cameras around the house. It never hurts to be cautious," he added. That incident was also soon forgotten, until Claire's second birthday. The party was intimate at home, just James's family, us, and a few close friends. While everyone was happily singing Happy Birthday, the doorbell suddenly rang. David went to open it and came back with a beautifully wrapped gift box in his hand. But his expression was a little strange. "It's from a courier service," he said. "It's a gift for Claire, but there's no sender's name." We were all surprised. I took the gift box and a vague uneasiness washed over me. The box was wrapped in high-quality gift paper, tied with an elaborate pink silk ribbon. Clearly, the sender had put a lot of effort into it. "It's probably from a business partner who appreciates you," James guessed. I thought so too. It was probably a business gift. I carefully opened the box under everyone's curious gaze. Inside, on soft velvet, was a small, beautiful white gold bracelet. It was made with great delicacy. The charm on the bracelet was a finely carved lotus flower, with a small diamond in the center that sparkled in the light. It was a very valuable gift. But what made me freeze was not its value, it was the small card that came with it. The handwriting on the card was smooth, elegant, and very familiar. I opened the card with trembling hands, and inside there was just one short line. "Happy birthday to our little one from her grandmother. To our little one from her grandmother." The word grandmother was like a lightning bolt striking my mind. Who was this grandmother? My mother had passed away. My mother-in-law, David's mother, lives in the countryside. And she doesn't have such refined handwriting, let alone my ex-mother-in-law. Trembling, I picked up the card and compared it with the handwriting. From the card with the white roses I received at the opening, they were identical. It was the same person, a person who called herself my daughter's grandmother. "Isabella, what's wrong? You're pale as a sheet." David shook my shoulder with concern. I didn't answer. I just showed him the card. David read the card and then furrowed his handsome brows. He picked up the bracelet and examined it closely. "This is very strange," he said. "Who is this person? How does she know Claire's birthday and send such an expensive gift?" I collapsed into the chair, my mind a mess. Scattered images suddenly came to my mind. The black car that followed me, the mysterious woman in the park, the anonymous white roses, and now a white gold bracelet with a note from her grandmother. This was all no coincidence. Someone, a woman, was silently watching my life and my daughter's. She knew a lot about us. She was very rich and called herself Claire's grandmother. But how was that possible? My mother had died years ago in a terrible car accident. I saw the photo from her funeral myself. And James and I held her burial. There could be no mistake. So who was this woman? A distant relative I didn't know, or a much more terrible secret I had no idea about? I looked at my little daughter. Claire was still laughing and babbling innocently, completely unaware of the storm that was silently gathering around her. I felt a knot in my chest. I would not let anyone harm my daughter. I had to find out the truth. Whoever this mysterious woman was, whatever her purpose, I had to find her. The quiet life I had worked so hard to achieve seemed to be facing a new storm. A storm blowing from the very past I thought I knew so well. The mysterious birthday gift completely shattered the party's happy atmosphere. After all the guests left, only we and James's family remained. My brother examined the bracelet, his face as serious as mine. "This is not a simple matter," he said quietly. "A custom-made baby bracelet like this, white gold and a diamond. It must cost thousands of dollars. This person is not ordinary." My sister-in-law, a wise and delicate woman, also spoke. "Couldn't it be someone from your ex-husband's family, Isabella? Maybe they're trying to get close to the child that way." "Impossible." I shook my head firmly. "They have no reason to, and more importantly, this isn't their handwriting." David was silent for a while, thoughtful, and finally spoke, with the seriousness of a police officer. "The first thing we need to do is trace the origin of this gift. I'll take the box and wrapping to the forensics lab. Maybe they'll find fingerprints or other clues. And I'll check all the security cameras on the streets near our house today. To track the courier's vehicle." James nodded in agreement. "Right. I'll also use my contacts to ask major jewelers if anyone recognizes this bracelet design. The lotus design is quite unique. It's likely a custom order." Our conversation hit a dead end. Although we considered several hypotheses, none could explain the appearance of this person calling herself grandmother. That night I couldn't sleep a wink. I held my little daughter, watching her sleeping face. An invisible fear enveloped me. Who was this woman? What did she want with my daughter? Did she have bad intentions? The following days passed in a state of anxiety and worry. David and James did everything possible to investigate, but all the leads seemed to hit a dead end. The courier service was a small company. The sender had paid in cash and used a fake name. The security cameras only showed an ordinary messenger, nothing special. No jeweler recognized the bracelet design. The mysterious woman seemed to have calculated everything meticulously, leaving no trace. Seeing the investigation stalled, I felt even more anxious. I decided I couldn't just wait passively. I had to find the answers myself. I decided to start with my past, with what I knew about my mother. I took a few days off work, left Claire with my mother-in-law, and returned alone to my parents' old house, in the town where my brother and I grew up. I hadn't been back in a long time. The house was the same, covered in the dust of time, but every corner evoked warm memories of my mother. I started cleaning the attic where my mother kept old items and family mementos. I hoped to find among these seemingly insignificant objects some clue about the mysterious woman, some secret my mother never told us. I flipped through the old albums one by one. Black and white photos, faded color photos, my mother beautiful and radiant in her youth, my parents happy on their wedding day, and photos of James and me as children, smiling innocently in our parents' arms. I checked them over and over, but I didn't see any unfamiliar, luxurious-looking woman. Just when I was about to give up, my hand bumped against a small wooden box, hidden in the bottom of an old trunk. The box was locked with a small, rusty padlock. After struggling for a long time, I managed to open it. Inside there were no jewels or money, but a bundle of yellowish letters carefully tied with a purple ribbon. I picked up the bundle of letters with trembling hands. The handwriting was not my mother's or my father's. It was a woman's handwriting, smooth and elegant, identical to the one on Claire's birthday card. I felt my heart stop. I quickly opened the first letter. My dear sister Carmen, it's been a year since that fateful day. I still can't forget how you saved me from that car. That was about to explode. I don't know how I can ever repay you for this favor. I'm sending you a small gift. Please accept it. I know you'll refuse, but please don't. Consider it a small token from me for the 2 children you have at home. Now I must go. I can't stay in this place that has taken everything from me. Maybe one day, when everything calms down, we'll see each other again. With all my love, Adriana. I reread the letter several times, my mind a mess. Sister Carmen, that was undoubtedly my mother. A car accident, a rescue. My mother had never told us that story. And Adriana, who was this woman? Why was she writing to my mother? I quickly read the following letters. They were letters sent from abroad, from France and Switzerland. Adriana told my mother about her new life, her loneliness, the torment of having had to abandon her home. She always asked about James and me, and always sent us expensive gifts, gifts that my mother probably never told us we had. The last letter was dated about 5 years ago, and the handwriting was a bit shakier. Sister Carmen, I think I don't have much time left. This damned illness has tormented me for too long. The only thing I regret is never having returned to take care of my 2 children. I know I don't deserve to. I abandoned them. But please, sister, love them for me. Tell them that wherever I am, their mother will always be watching over and loving them. I'm sending you this key. It's the key to a personal safety deposit box in a Swiss bank. Inside is all the fortune I have amassed. Please give it to my children when they are older. Consider it the last compensation from a sinful mother. Goodbye, my sister, my friend, and my savior. Adriana. The letter fell from my hands. My whole body was shaking. Children, mother, the whole truth, an incredible truth, was slowly revealing itself before my eyes. This woman, Adriana, she was. No, it couldn't be. My mother was Carmen, and she was dead. There had to be a mistake. But this bundle of letters, this key, and the familiar handwriting... I sat stunned in the middle of the dusty attic, my mind filled with confusion. The past I knew, the identity I believed in. Everything suddenly felt blurry and strange. A huge family secret, a secret buried for over 20 years, was about to be opened, and it was directly related to me. That night I couldn't sleep for a minute. The bundle of letters from Adriana and the small key lay silently on the desk, but my mind was a whirlwind. Her mother, 2 children. Those phrases repeated over and over, digging deep into my heart. I tried to dismiss the crazy idea that James and I were not the biological children of the woman we always called Mom. But everything fit together in a terrifying way. The handwriting, the expensive gifts, and calling herself Claire's grandmother. The next morning I couldn't wait any longer. I had to find James. He had to know too. He was my brother, my only family. He had the right to know the truth about our roots. I drove back to the city in a hurry. I went straight to my brother's office. Seeing my haggard appearance and sunken eyes, he questioned me with concern. I said nothing. I just silently closed the office door and placed the bundle of letters and the key on his desk. "Read it," I said in a hoarse voice. James, surprised, picked up the first letter. As he read, his expression changed from surprise to amazement and shock. He read every letter, and the hand holding the paper began to tremble. When he finished the last letter, he collapsed into his chair, staring into space with lost eyes. "No, it can't be," he muttered, shaking his head over and over. "Our mother is Carmen. Who is this Adriana?" "I thought so too," I said bitterly. "But brother, look at this handwriting. It's identical to the one on Claire's birthday card." I showed him the photo of the card I had taken with my phone. James stared at both handwritings. The last bit of doubt in his eyes vanished. He covered his face with his hands, and his broad shoulders trembled. For the first time in my life, I saw my brother, always so strong and steady, so fragile and helpless. We sat in silence for a long time, each lost in our own confused thoughts. The past we knew, the mother we loved, had all suddenly become a huge question mark. So, Mom Carmen... James raised his head, his voice hoarse. She wasn't our biological mother. She raised us. She loved us. Why did she hide this from us? I don't know. I shook my head, but I think she had her reasons. Mom Adriana said she had to leave, that she couldn't stay. Something terrible must have happened. Car accident. That clue came back to my mind. Mom Adriana said Mom Carmen saved her. Yes, the secret must be in that car accident, James. I looked my brother straight in the eyes. We have to find out the truth, not just for us, but for both our mothers. James nodded. His gaze became much more determined. You're right. We have to find out exactly what happened 25 years ago. Our investigation began with the vague clues from the letters: the car accident, the date, and the name Adriana. Thanks to James's social position and David's police contacts, it wasn't too difficult to reopen the old case files covered in the dust of time. A few days later, we got the accident report. It was a terrible crash on a mountain pass. A luxury car lost control and plunged off a cliff, exploding. According to the report, there were 4 people in the car: the president of the Rivas Jewelry Group and his wife, and the driver and his wife. It was concluded that all 4 had died. Rivas Jewelry Group. That name left James and me stunned. It was an empire that once dominated the country's jewelry industry, but mysteriously collapsed shortly after its president's death. Wait a minute, said James. Rivas, I remember. Our father worked at Rivas before founding the Smith Group. He was the financial director there. Another coincidence. Everything seemed to be connected. But the report says all 4 died, I said, puzzled. So who is Mom Adriana, and why did she say Mom Carmen saved her? That's the key. David intervened, sitting with us. He pointed to a part of the autopsy report. Of the 4 bodies found, one was so burned it was unrecognizable. Based on some bone fragments, they could only confirm it was a woman. And people assumed it was the wife of the Rivas president, Mrs. Adriana. That means... I held my breath. It's very likely that woman wasn't Mrs. Adriana, David concluded. Mrs. Adriana survived the accident. And it's possible that the person who saved her was our mother Carmen. But for some reason she chose to become a dead person in everyone's eyes and live another life abroad. But why? Why would a woman with status, money, and everything else abandon everything, even her 2 children? This accident, James mused. Was it really an accident? Or a murder? My brother's questions silenced the room. If it was a murder, who was the mastermind? And why did Mom Adriana have to flee? At that moment, David's phone rang. It was an old colleague from Chicago. He stepped out to answer and came back with a very serious expression. New information, he said. I asked them to check the list of top executives from the Rivas Jewelry Group at that time. Guess who was appointed acting president? Right after the death of President Rivas and his wife. Who? James and I asked in unison. It was him. David's voice became firm. The president of Golden Empire, Mr. Morris. That name appeared once again. Our family's old enemy. The man who drove our father to his death. A wave of nausea and anger rose in my throat. This can't be a coincidence. James slammed the table. Morris, our father, Rivas Jewelry, and that car crash. There has to be a connection. A dark and terrible picture was beginning to take shape, a conspiracy hidden for 25 years, a crime that not only claimed several lives, but also tore a family apart. And now, by chance, we seemed to be getting close to the heart of that secret. The search for our roots had unexpectedly turned into the pursuit of the truth in a serial murder case, and the most likely suspect was our family's arch nemesis. The name Mr. Morris was like the key. That opened a dark door to the terrible secrets of the past. All the events now came together in a terrifying hypothesis. Mr. Morris hadn't just driven our father to his death, to take over the Smith Group. It was very likely that 25 years earlier, he was behind that terrible accident, to devour the entire Rivas Jewelry Group. If that's true, James gritted his teeth, he's not human, he's a demon. But this is all just conjecture for now, said David, trying to maintain his professional calm. We don't have concrete evidence to charge him. The case is too old, and almost all traces have likely been erased. And Mom Adriana, I intervened, if she's alive, she's the most important witness. She'll know exactly what happened. But why did she flee? Why didn't she come forward to report it? She was probably afraid, James replied. The enemy was too powerful. She had to worry not only about herself, but also about her 2 children. Maybe becoming a dead person was the only way to protect us. I felt a lump in my throat. My biological mother's departure wasn't abandonment, but a silent sacrifice. She had to give up everything for the safety of her 2 children, living in loneliness and torment in a foreign country, and our mother Carmen, who raised us, was also part of that sacrifice. She lived her whole life with that secret locked in her heart. What do we do now? I asked, looking between David and James. Do we go to Switzerland to find Mom Adriana? No, David and James objected almost in unison. It's too dangerous, David explained. Mr. Morris is an old fox. His information network is everywhere. If he finds out we're investigating, he won't hesitate to use any means to silence us like he did with your father. Besides, we're not sure if Mom Adriana wants to see us. The last letter was written 5 years ago, and nobody knows what situation she's in now. David is right, James continued. What we need to do now is look for evidence here first. The safety deposit box key is the most important clue. It's very likely that the fortune Mom Adriana left contains not only money, but also something that can expose Mr. Morris's crimes. But that's a Swiss bank, I said, worried. Their banking secrecy laws are the strictest in the world. Even if we have the key, I don't think I can just go and open it. Leave it to me, James said, with a determined look. I have a lawyer friend who specializes in international law. I'll ask him to find a solution. It might take time, but it's not impossible. While James handled the Switzerland issue, David and I decided to start from another angle, to find the former witnesses who worked at the Rivas Jewelry Group at the time of the accident. 25 years is a long time, but surely there were still people who knew what happened, people who had to keep silent due to Mr. Morris's oppression, bribery, or threats. Our search was very difficult. Many people had moved, many had passed away. Those who remained upon mentioning the names Rivas Jewelry and Mr. Morris all shook their heads in fear and refused to talk. Mr. Morris's power and cruelty had created a shadow, so large it had oppressed them for decades. After several days of desperate searching, we finally got a lucky break. We found Mr. Pablo, the retired former driver of the President Rivas family. He was now a frail old man, living alone in a small house on the outskirts. When we arrived, he was sitting on his porch, gazing into the distance with sad eyes. At first, he also refused to talk, but when I showed him Mom Adriana's photo and told him my identity, his old eyes filled with tears. "Miss, are you Miss Isabella?" he asked in a trembling voice. When I nodded, Mr. Pablo broke down crying. "My God, you're alive. I thought the president's entire family." He invited us into his house. After calming down, he began to tell the story from 25 years ago, a story he had kept in his heart like a nightmare. "The day of the accident," Mr. Pablo said with a shaky voice. "I was supposed to drive that car. But that morning, the vice president at the time, Mr. Morris, suddenly sent me to another province on an errand. He said it was urgent and sent another driver in my place. He was a young guy who had just started. I didn't know him well. When I heard the news of the accident, I felt something wasn't right." He continued, "That car was the president's. I checked it every day. It was impossible for the brakes to fail. I tried to tell the police, but no one believed me. They said I was rambling from grief. And a few days later, Mr. Morris sent someone to give me a large sum of money and to threaten me that if I kept talking, my family wouldn't be safe. Out of fear for my children. Mr. Pablo lowered his head, his voice full of regret. I had to keep silent. I took the money and left the job. For these 25 years, I haven't slept a single night in peace. The remorse and guilt have tormented me constantly, Mr. Pablo's testimony was living proof that the accident was not a coincidence, but a meticulously planned conspiracy. Mr. Morris, Mr. Pablo added, was not only cruel, but also very suspicious. He always had a small recorder installed in the president's office to monitor all his conversations. I saw him by chance one time secretly changing the batteries. A flash went through my mind. A recorder. If it was still there, it was very likely it had recorded important conversations, evidence that could expose Mr. Morris's crimes. But where is that office? The Rivas Jewelry Group doesn't exist anymore. Its old headquarters must be owned by another company now. When we felt lost, Mr. Pablo provided another valuable piece of information. After the president's death, Mr. Morris sealed his entire old office. He said it was to preserve his memories, but I know he was scared that someone would find something inside. That room is still intact on the top floor of the old Rivas building. All the clues seem to converge on one point. A room sealed for 25 years. That might hold the black box of the entire case. But how could we get into a place so heavily guarded by another group? The old Rivas building was now called the Golden Tower, standing in the city center like an impregnable fortress. Infiltrating it, especially the sealed room on the top floor, was an almost impossible mission for ordinary people like us. This can't be done through normal channels, David said, after walking around the building. The security system here is state-of-the-art. There are surveillance cameras everywhere and guards patrolling 24/7. The access doors on each floor use key cards. It's impossible to get in through the front door. While we were racking our brains, we finally received a call from James, who had been silent for several days with important news. I've spoken with my lawyer friend. He says that as biological children, we have full rights to request information about our mother's safety deposit box at the Swiss bank. But the process is very complicated and will take at least a few months. But he discovered something interesting. 5 years ago, just when Mom Adriana sent the last letter, someone else tried to access that safety deposit box, but failed due to lack of identity documents. Who? I asked anxiously. It was an agent of Mr. Morris. I felt a chill. He also knew about the existence of that safety deposit box. He had been looking for it for years. This confirmed even more that there was something inside that threatened him, and it also meant we didn't have much time. If Mr. Morris found out we were investigating, he wouldn't hesitate to act first. The urgency of the situation forced us to make a bold decision. If we can't get in through the front door, I said, looking at David and James, we'll go in another way. The Golden Tower and our Smith Tower are right next to each other. The roof height of both buildings is almost the same. Don't tell me, James looked at me astonished. No, Isabella, it's too dangerous. It's the only way, I said firmly. We don't have any more time. You can disable the security system of the Smith Tower. David has the technology and experience as a police officer, and I have to go in there. That room is connected to my past. After a long discussion, they both had to reluctantly agree. The plan was drawn up with great detail and caution. The time of action was set for 2 a.m, when activity in both buildings comes to a complete halt. That night, the city slept, only the dim lights of the street lamps remained. When I stood on the roof of the Smith Tower with David, my heart was pounding like a drum. The high-altitude wind whipped my hair. From here, the roof of the Golden Tower looked to be only about 15 feet away. It wasn't a long distance, but it was an abyss between life and death. David prepared the equipment carefully. He was an expert at this. He used a special gun to launch a high-strength cable to the railing of the building opposite. The cable was firmly anchored at both ends. "I'll go first," David said in a low, reassuring voice. "When I cross and secure the area, you'll slide down the rope. Don't be afraid. I'll hold you tight." I nodded. My palms were already damp with sweat. I held my breath as I watched David nimbly hang from the rope and cross the dark void. A few minutes later, he arrived safely on the other side and signaled to me. It was my turn. I took a deep breath and clung tightly to the cold rope. My whole body was suspended in the night sky. Below, the city lights seemed distant, and a small mistake could make me fall. But the thought of my mother, of the truth waiting for me on the other side, gave me strength. When my feet touched the railing of the Golden Tower, David hurried to help me. "You made it," he whispered proudly. We quickly disabled the rooftop cameras and found our way to the emergency stairs. The sealed office was just on the floor below. The old lock was no problem for David. The heavy door creaked open, revealing a space that had been plunged into darkness and dust for 25 years. We turned on a small flashlight, and the dim light scanned the room. Everything was as Mr. Pablo had described. The desk, the bookshelf, the sofa set, everything was covered in a thick layer of dust. The stale air smelled like time. According to Mr. Pablo, the recorder was hidden behind a large oil painting hanging on the wall. David carefully took down the painting. Sure enough, an old cassette recorder was ingeniously installed in a small alcove in the wall. "Will it still work?" I asked, worried. "It's hard to say," David replied, "but let's take it anyway." While David dismantled the device, I started searching more. Intuitively, I felt there must be something else in that room. My flashlight beam scanned the bookshelf. Hundreds of old leather-bound books, mostly on management and law. Suddenly, I remembered a habit of my father's. As a financial director, he also always carried a small notebook where he jotted down the most important things, secrets he didn't want anyone to know. Did President Rivas have a similar habit? I started pulling out the books one by one, flipping through the pages quickly, and when I picked up a thick law book titled Justice and Truth, I noticed it felt strangely heavy. When I opened it, I felt my heart stop. The inside of the book was hollowed out, leaving just enough space for a small black leather-bound notebook. I picked it up with trembling hands. "This is it. This has to be it." Just then, we heard footsteps and a faint murmur of voices from the hallway. "Check the rooftop area carefully." I think I saw a suspicious shadow. I felt my heart sink. We had been discovered. The building's security guards were on patrol. The way back was blocked. We were trapped in this secret room. The footsteps in the hallway grew closer. The beams from the security team's flashlights filtered through the crack in the door, creating ghostly shadows in the dusty room. I felt a lump in my throat, and a cold sweat ran down my back. If they caught us here with this evidence in hand, our entire plan would be ruined. We would be charged with breaking and entering, and the notebook and recorder would never see the light of day. David signaled me to be quiet. He quickly turned off the flashlight and pulled me behind an old, massive filing cabinet. We held our breath, trying not to make the slightest sound. We heard the jingle of a key in the lock. My heart was about to burst. "Are they coming in? This room has been sealed for a long time." "Who would go in?" said one voice. "Better safe than sorry," replied another. "Lately the boss has asked us to keep a close eye on this area." The boss must have been one of Mr. Morris's people. Despite so many years, he still had this place watched. That confirmed even more that he knew very well what was hidden here. The lock clicked, and the door creaked open. A dazzling flashlight beam swept the room. David and I almost stopped breathing, pressed against the cold filing cabinet. Fortunately, the cabinet was very large, and we were hidden in the deepest corner. "See nothing, just dust and cobwebs," the first voice said again. "Let's go. Let's check other places." They stayed at the door for a few more seconds. The light scanned the room again, and then the door slammed shut. We heard the lock click again, and the footsteps faded away. We were safe, at least for now. I let out a sigh of relief, feeling my strength fail. David signaled me to wait a little longer. About 10 minutes later, when we were sure the security team was gone, he turned the small flashlight back on. "We have to get out of here now," he whispered. "The way we came in is no longer safe." "But how the main door is locked and there are guards in the hallway." We were completely trapped. David's gaze swept the room and stopped on a small ventilation window near the ceiling. "That's the only way out." That window was very small and high up, barely big enough for one person to pass through. Besides, it opened onto the building's facade. Outside, there was only a narrow ledge, barely a foot wide, running along the wall. "It's too dangerous." I shook my head. "One small slip and—" "It's the only option," David said firmly. "Do you trust me?" In this critical situation, his calm and determination were my only support. I nodded. David moved the old desk against the wall and stacked a chair on top. He climbed up first and carefully unlatched the window. A gust of cold night air blew in. "That ledge leads to an emergency balcony at the end of the hall," he explained. "It's about 30 feet away. I'll go first and come back to help you. You just have to stick to the wall and walk very slowly." With that, he climbed out the window and carefully stepped onto the narrow ledge. My heart leaped watching him. A strong gust of wind could have made him fall. But David moved with great professionalism. His steps were firm, his back pressed against the wall. A few minutes later, he reached the emergency balcony safely and signaled to me. It was my turn. The notebook and recorder were stored safely in my crossbody bag. I took a deep breath, trying not to look down. My legs trembled as I put my foot on the ledge. I felt my whole body stick to the cold wall. The wind whistled in my ears, carrying the sounds of the city at night. "Don't be afraid. Just look at me." I heard David's voice from ahead, a deep, calm, and reassuring voice. "Just one step at a time." I focused on David's figure, trying not to think about the deep abyss below. 30 feet had never seemed so long. When my hand finally touched the one David held out, I felt like I had come back to life. We went down several floors via the emergency staircase, and then found a way back to the main hallway. Fortunately, the security team was patrolling another area. We quickly returned to the roof and crossed back to the Smith Tower on the rope. When my feet touched the familiar ground, I collapsed, panting. The suffocating escape was finally over. Back in the safety of my apartment, we didn't rest. Instead, we immediately began to examine what we had brought. James had also arrived and listened to our story with a worried expression. David carefully opened the old recorder. After fiddling with it for a while, he managed to get it working. We held our breath and listened closely. The old cassette tape began to turn, emitting the sound of time. And then we heard a familiar voice, that of President Rivas, my biological father. He was talking on the phone. "I don't agree. Vice President Morris, that project has too much risk. The cash flow isn't transparent. I can't approve it." After a brief silence, his voice turned sharper. "I've told you. Don't try to fool me. I know what you're doing behind my back. If you don't stop, I'll reveal everything to the world." The call ended and my heart was pounding. This was proof of the conflict between my father and Mr. Morris. But the next recording truly stunned us. This time it was Mr. Morris's voice. He was talking to someone. "The old man has found out everything. We can't let him live. A car accident, yes, we have to make it look like an accident. His family, take care of all of them, leave no one behind. And then Rivas will be ours." A confession recorded 25 years ago, an undeniable confession. At the same time, I opened the black leather-bound notebook. Inside were not only records of Rivas Jewelry's business transactions, but also brief diary entries from my father. He wrote about his worry. Upon discovering Mr. Morris's conspiracy, his anxiety about feeling watched, and his infinite love for his wife and 2 young children. And on the last page there was a line written hastily, in a special ink, an ink visible only under ultraviolet light, a prudent habit of finance professionals. James and I knew about it. We quickly turned off the lights, and David shined a small UV flashlight he always carried on the paper. The writing appeared. "All the original evidence contracts bank statements are in the safety deposit box at the Swiss bank. Number XYZ, I have entrusted the key to Carmen. If anything happens to me, trust her. Carmen will know what to do." Everything became clear. Mom Carmen not only raised us, but she was the trusted person to whom my father entrusted the mission of protecting the most important evidence, the inheritance and the future of his 2 children. The love and sacrifice that both our mothers showed us were immense and grand. Tears welled up again, but this time they were tears of gratitude and pride. We now held in our hands the confession from the past, the clue to the decisive evidence stored in Switzerland, and Mr. Morris's current crimes, the plan for the final counterattack. The decisive battle was about to begin. The net of justice had been woven tightly. All that was left was for the biggest fish to fall into it himself. With the irrefutable evidence in our hands, we knew the time for the final judgment was very near, but we also knew that confronting an old cunning fox like Mr. Morris required us not to act hastily. A small mistake could give him the chance to turn the tables and erase all his tracks. "We need an absolutely perfect plan," James said with a firm expression. "We have to attack him by surprise without giving him time to react." The plan was drawn up with all 3 of us participating. James, with his position in the business world, would deliver the decisive blow in the commercial sphere. David, with the support of his trusted colleagues, would handle the legal aspect to leave him no escape, and I would confront him directly, becoming the fuse for the bomb that was about to detonate. The first step was to resolve the matter in Switzerland, with the recording and the notebook as evidence, and the cooperation of the national police. James's lawyer friend quickly convinced the Swiss bank. They agreed to open the safety deposit box, but on the condition that I was present, and that the process was carried out under the supervision of both parties. A week later, James and I were in Zurich, Switzerland. The bank's vault was cold and silent. When the familiar metal box was placed on the table, my heart pounded again. Mom Carmen's key slid smoothly into the lock. And with a twist, the box door clicked open. Inside, there was no money or jewelry, but a thick bundle of documents carefully wrapped in plastic. These were all the originals of the phantom contracts, the bank statements recording the illicit money flows, and all the secret agreements Mr. Morris had used to take over Rivas Jewelry. Each document bore his handwritten signature. This was the ultimate weapon, the final sword that could end that demon's career. With the lawyer present, we made copies of all the material and sent them immediately to David. Everything was ready. Upon our return to the country, the atmosphere was tense. Mr. Morris, after the failed intrusion attempt at the Golden Tower, seemed to have sensed the danger. He began to show defensive behavior. The number of his bodyguards doubled, and all his meetings were strictly controlled. "He's trying to cover his tracks and divert his assets," David reported in an emergency meeting. "We have to act before it's too late." D-Day was set. It was the day of the Golden Empire's General Shareholders Meeting, a grand event that brought together all the management, major shareholders, and the media. It would be the perfect stage for us to end this play. That morning I chose a dark red dress, a color symbolizing power and determination. James wore his usual elegant suit, but his eyes held an unusually fierce determination. We attended not as competitors, but as guests of honor, a surprising move James had arranged beforehand. Through some shareholders favorable to the Smith Group, the National Convention Center's auditorium was packed. Mr. Morris sat at the head of the stage, still maintaining an expression of confidence and authority. He was giving a passionate speech about Golden Empire's achievements and its ambitious future plans, a perfect speech from a competent leader. When his speech ended to thunderous applause, James signaled to me, "Now." "Excuse me," a voice echoed from the door. It was David entering in uniform with an investigation team. "Mr. Richard Morris, president of Golden Empire. We are here to execute an emergency arrest and search warrant in connection with charges of organized murder and misappropriation of assets." The entire hall was stunned, and all the cameras instantly turned towards the stage. Mr. Morris leaped to his feet. His face changed, but he tried to maintain his composure. "What are you saying? There must be a mistake." "I am an honest businessman." "There is no mistake, Mr. Morris." I raised my voice. As I walked up from the audience, all eyes turned back to me. "Or do you want me to remind you of the car accident that took place on a mountain pass 25 years ago?" Hearing this, the composure on his face completely crumbled. He looked at me and his eyes held hatred and astonishment. James also stood up and walked onto the stage. He held a bundle of documents in his hand. "And also what you did to my father. The time has come for you to pay for all your crimes." James signaled to the technical team, and on the giant screen behind Mr. Morris, instead of growth charts, images of documents, contracts, and bank statements appeared. At the same time, the recording of Mr. Morris's own voice, ordering the elimination of President Rivas's entire family, resounded throughout the hall. "Turn it off! Turn it off now!" Mr. Morris roared like a wounded beast, rushing madly towards the control panel. But it was too late. All the evidence had been revealed. In front of hundreds of people, in front of the cameras of the entire country. David and his colleagues quickly moved in and put him in handcuffs. "Richard Morris, you are under arrest." The Golden Empire, built on the blood and tears of others, collapsed in an instant. Standing on the stage, I watched as the enemy of two families was taken away. I didn't feel joy, but a strange light relief. Justice had finally been served. "Mom, Dad, are you watching?" "We did it." In the midst of it all, a woman ran out from the crowd and knelt at my feet, crying inconsolably. It was Mr. Morris's wife. "Miss Isabella, please forgive my husband. He was just too ambitious." I looked at the poor woman before me, and then looked out the window. The sky was still blue, the sun was still warm, and life would go on. But there are mistakes that can never be forgiven. The case of Golden Empire's collapse caused a huge shock not only in the business world, but in all of society. The crimes hidden for 25 years finally came to light. The media reported and analyzed, day after day, Mr. Morris's cruelty and cunning. He went from being a successful entrepreneur, an example of self-improvement, to the embodiment of evil in an instant. With irrefutable evidence, Mr. Morris was sentenced to the maximum penalty for his crimes. His accomplices, the subordinates who had helped him for years, were also brought to justice and received the punishment they deserved. After the trial, our lives gradually returned to normal. The Smith Group, after eliminating an unfair competitor, experienced spectacular development, becoming a company that was not only economically solid, but also respected for its business ethics. James, after avenging his father, seemed to have had a huge weight lifted. He became more cheerful and open, and spent more time with his small family. As for the Rivas Jewelry Group, as the sole legal heirs, James and I decided not to keep it. It was stained with too much blood and tears. We decided to sell all the group's assets, and a part was used to compensate the victims and their families who had been harmed by Mr. Morris's illegal practices. The rest was used to create a charitable foundation called the Adriana Carmen Foundation, a foundation to help orphans and women in difficult situations. It was the best way to honor and thank our two great mothers. A year after the big case closed, I received a letter. Not an email, but a handwritten letter from an address in France. The handwriting was much weaker, but I recognized it instantly. It was Mom Adriana's handwriting. "My dear children, James and Isabella, when you read this letter, Mom will be in a very distant place. From the explosion at the wedding to the final trial, Mom saw everything. You were very brave and strong. Mom is very proud of you. I know you may never forgive the mother who abandoned you for decades. But really, I had no other choice. Dying back then was the only way to protect you from that demon's clutches. I had to live with the torment, nostalgia, and guilt. But knowing that you grew up safe under the love of my sister Carmen made all my sacrifice worthwhile. Now that the evil man has paid for his crimes, the heavy burden in my heart can finally be released. I think I can now go in peace and reunite with your father. Be happy, my children. Live a truly meaningful life in the name of your mother and father. I love you very much. Mom Adriana. Along with the letter, my mother's death certificate was attached. She had passed away just days after Mr. Morris's trial ended. James and I hugged each other and cried. They were tears of sadness, but also of understanding and peace. We could finally call her Mom, with peace in our hearts. My life, after so many storms, finally found a quiet harbor. David and I decided to have a small, warm wedding in Mallorca, where our love began. On the wedding day, instead of a luxurious wedding dress, I chose an elegant silk dress in a soft, simple, and pure pink color. In my hand, instead of a bouquet, I held tightly to David's hand, the man who had accompanied me through the most difficult times. James looked at me with a happy smile. His eyes shone with joy. Claire, in a beautiful princess dress, scattered rose petals on the path we walked. In the midst of that warm atmosphere, we had a special guest. It was Mr. Pablo, the former driver. He brought us a small gift, an old photo of my biological parents, in a simple wooden frame. "Miss, I wish you all the happiness," he said in a trembling voice. I accepted the gift with a heart full of emotion. The past was over, but the good memories and good feelings would endure forever. That evening, as the sun set over the pine-covered hill, David and I stood side by side contemplating the distant horizon. A new chapter of life, a new life full of love and hope was opening before us. I knew that from now on no storm could knock me down, because at my side there will always be people who love me unconditionally. And I believe that somewhere up high, my 3 mothers and fathers will be watching over us and blessing us with a smile.